kicking off with Raw, as Seth Rollins appeared this week to give an update on his condition, mere days after being assaulted by Finn Balor on last week's Raw and NXT. Unfortunately for Rollins, Balor would again have his number, attacking the World Heavyweight Champion from behind in a segment that didn't go entirely to plan. Rollins was busted open during the brawl and received a cut just below his eye on his cheek, and this attack would have continued if not for the arrival of NXT champion Carmelo Hayes. According to sources operating backstage, Rollins' bleeding was not a planned spot at all, and while it certainly made the brawl look more real, Balor was advised to be safe from backstage personnel. Rollins himself was said to be completely fine with what happened, citing it as what happens in wrestling, but Finn still apologized behind the scenes, and there's no reports of any issues. Balor and Rollins will collide this weekend at Money in the Bank in London in what will be a hard-fought match, and this week's Raw certainly added another layer to this intense feud. It was upon returning to WWE in January that Vince McMahon vowed he'd have little to no presence in creative, and if you believe that claim, we've got a bridge to sell you. Since WrestleMania 39, McMahon has made changes to WWE programming of various sizes, with significant changes being made to last week's SmackDown. According to PW Insider, McMahon's influence on WWE's creative direction continues to be prominent, with last week's WWERaw seeing drastic revisions, followed by significant changes on SmackDown. The report adds that Vince McMahon's influence is expected to increase, especially as the Endeavor acquisition approaches. The recent trend of McMahon's involvement in creative decisions is likely to continue. 3 matches announced for SmackDown ended up not happening, including Baron Corbin vs. Cameron Grimes, as well as a triple threat between LA Knight, Santos Escobar, and Butch. The biggest match cut, though, would have seen Bayley put her women's Money in the Bank ladder match spot on the line against Shotzi, and WWE gave no reason or on-screen acknowledgement to the changes. It's reported that this led to people backstage being frustrated about the changes, and both Bayley and Shotzi reacted to their match being nixed on social media. Despite not being present at the vast majority of tapings, McMahon has been making changes remotely since WrestleMania 39 to various degrees, and this week's Raw was no different. While the exact nature of his changes to the go-home Raw before Money in the Bank are not known, Mike Johnson of PW Insider confirmed the changes were made, directly orchestrated by the chairman. As we reported yesterday, a meeting was called including McMahon, Triple H, Kevin Dunn, Bruce Pritchard, and the writers to discuss these changes, and this meeting was called after a loud altercation between Vince and the Game following last week's SmackDown. Sources close to the situation revealed that Vince was on the call while the other attendees were together physically present for a meeting. The consensus from the meeting is that the creative team should be prepared to make changes under his instructions, which left Triple H, who had no say in the decision, understandably unhappy. During the meeting, the group also discussed plans for SummerSlam and Survivor Series, and the idea of NXT being involved in this November's show was discussed. The belief is that NXT is treated as even bigger now than before, with the influx of main roster talent to try and boost ratings, so it'd only make sense that the Gold brand is featured. Other than that, there's no specifics on what else was discussed at the meeting, though we do know that Triple H spoke following last year's Survivor Series about leaving the brand warfare idea in the past. While Triple H did say that at the post-Survivor Series War Games press conference, it's all come down to what Vince McMahon wants, and nobody seemingly has the power to stop him. Speaking on Wrestling Observer Radio, Dave Meltzer gave a glimpse into how morale is after several matches were nixed from last week's SmackDown. He said, "You can't say anything. That's what somebody brought up to me. If you're a writer, you can't say anything to Vince. Even if you're Paul Levesque, you can't say anything to Vince because you're f***ed if you say anything to Vince, so you can't say anything. They're trying to figure out a way to have him not do this. One person noted to me, it would be a lot better if you did it the day before or 2 days before, but he's doing it the day of the show." While 3 matches were nixed from SmackDown, LA Knight was still allowed to compete and defeated Rey Mysterio, which Meltzer called a sign that McMahon is a fan of Knight's work. Meltzer added that while there's frustration, everyone is scared to confront McMahon over the issue, which only adds to the belief that Vince is essentially able to do anything he wants. When McMahon retired last year, fans were elated at the prospect of creative improving, and while there has been significant changes, the entire WWE product remains under his thumb. This week's Raw is said to have been similarly chaotic, as BWE tweeted that over half the talent, in fact closer to 3/4, were traveling immediately after the show. BWE added that it would be a rushed Raw as the superstars had places to be ahead of their flights to the UK later this week. Clearly things are quite chaotic right now, and while the creative team don't know if the ideas they create get a chance to make it to TV, they know that whatever Vince McMahon says goes. This week's Raw opened up with Cody Rhodes 5 days ahead of his match this Saturday against Dominik Mysterio at WWE Money in the Bank. Mysterio has been a rising star in WWE, especially since he turned heel in Cardiff last September, but Cody was more than ready to roast Mysterio this week and cut him down to size. Mysterio and Rhea Ripley opened the proceedings in Savannah, Georgia to a hot crowd who hardly let Dom get a word in with their boos, and the fans were elated to see Cody arrive on the scene. While Dominik was taking shots at Cody, the American Nightmare responded by roasting the young star who, as you may have expected, hid behind Rhea Ripley. Perhaps the biggest shot that Cody took at Dominik was when he said that he wanted to see if Dominik was half the man his father Rey Mysterio is, a line that rattled the self-professed hardened criminal. It'll be interesting to see how things play out this Saturday at Money in the Bank, and while Cody is expected to win, Dominik and the possible interference of Rhea Ripley won't make things easy. Money in the Bank news now as this year's event in London is mere days away, but on this week's Raw, a major match was added to the show featuring one of WWE's top European superstars. For weeks, Matt Riddle has been a thorn in Imperium's side, and before this week's Raw went on the air, Riddle challenged Gunther to an Intercontinental title match at Money in the Bank. After laying out Riddle with his Imperium allies during Raw, Gunther accepted the challenge, and the match was later made official between the two for the upcoming Premium Live event. Raw also saw Gunther put on a classic with Sami Zayn, as he and Kevin Owens have had their issues with Imperium, and at times it looked like Zayn was going to get the win. Just as it looked like Zayn's win was assured, Ludwig Kaiser caused the distraction, allowing the injured Giovanni Vinci to hit Zayn with his crutch, setting up Gunther to hit the powerbomb and get the win. Gunther is on his way to having the longest reigning Intercontinental Championship reign of all time, but he will have to get through Riddle first, and the original bro will not make things easy in London. Odds are that Gunther will receive a fantastic response in his native Europe, but so will Riddle, who remains to be a hit with audiences no matter where he is in the world. Do you think Riddle should become the new Intercontinental Champion, or should WWE continue with Gunther's historic reign? Sound off in the comments section below. Raw also saw a Women's Summit featuring 6 superstars who will be in the Women's Money in the Bank ladder match, which saw plenty of storylines get developed. While the focus of the segment was on the upcoming ladder match, the Summit saw the continuation of Io Sky and Bayley's beef, while Trish Stratus talked trash at Becky Lynch. It was the man who stopped the talking by throwing the first punch, a very loud one at that, at Stratus, and chaos would quickly ensue, with Io Sky taking out several women, including Bayley, with a moonsault. This gave Lynch the opportunity to climb the ladder and retrieve the briefcase in a sign of what she plans to do this weekend in London. There was also an interesting segment between Lynch and Rhea Ripley after this, teasing who will Becky be cashing in on should she capture the women's briefcase at Money in the Bank. It's been over a year since Lynch last held a singles women's title in WWE, but did recently run with Lita as the women's tag champions. And do you want to see the man win in London? Or should someone else be leaving the UK with the briefcase? Ever since being squashed at Night of Champions, Natalya just hasn't been the same, but there will be something big for the Queen of Hearts on next week's Raw. BWE reports the next week's show will see Natalya face Rhea Ripley in a career-defining title rematch, and we'll have to see what both talented women do on next week's broadcast. On Raw, Cody Rhodes would defeat Damian Priest in the main event, but was attacked after the match by Dominik Mysterio, but that didn't stop Cody connecting with fans after the show. Off-air, Cody was seen taking photos and shaking hands with fans, and seemed to have calmed down after the attack by Dominik. It was quite the return to his home state of Georgia for Cody, who petted his dog Pharaoh during a backstage interview with Kathy Kelly on Raw, in which he fired a warning to the Judgment Day. With rumors of Rhodes versus Brock Lesnar at SummerSlam, Cody wants to pick up momentum heading into a match with the Beast, and expect an exceptional outing this weekend in London. Raw also saw Ronda Rousey defeat Raquel Rodriguez, but post-match was confronted by Liv Morgan. Fortunately for Rousey, she was able to escape with little time to lose, but it's clear that tensions are boiling as we approach the WWE Women's Tag Title match at Money in the Bank. Shinsuke Nakamura will also be at Money in the Bank as part of the men's ladder match, and he'll be hoping to bounce back after his Raw loss to Ricochet. The pair had an excellent match, which also saw Bronson Reed ejected from ringside, but it was a Shooting Star Press that got the win for the one and only. And we're ending with John Cena, who was once the unquestionable top star of WWE, but in recent years, fans have seen less and less of the 16-time world champion. One man who worked closely with John for years was former SmackDown GM Teddy Long, but the Hall of Famer isn't confident about Cena making an in-ring return. On the Road Trip After Hours podcast, Long admitted that he's not a Cena fan and said he has doubts over how serious John is about getting back in the ring. While Cena said that he will wrestle again, it's unknown when that'll be. And what do you make of Teddy Long's comments? Let us know down below.